DairyNZ has been working alongside school principals to develop a database to help smooth the way for both incoming pupils and their schools around transitional pressure points in the dairying calendar, such as Gypsy Day. Southland's Limehills is one impressive example of a rural school that's made big efforts to meet the needs of itinerant and immigrant children and their families.
Our children come from the central Southland area, so we have a bus that runs around Otapiri and the Boggy Burn area out to the east, and the sort of Southland area out to the west, and around Kawana and Limehills and Centrebush, all sort of within half an hour of Winton, really. Generally, our children are farm kids, yeah, from sheep and beef farms and cropping farms and dairy farms. There's a few challenges wrapped up with the impact of the dairy industry on schools. Some very, very positive things too, but one of the things we do battle is transients and being able to plan for transients. So typically around June, at Gypsy Day time, we don't often know how the school roll is going to look, so it's very difficult to plan around classrooms and teaching allocations. It's often children that have moved a lot of schools, so it's very, very hard to know exactly what the gaps are in their learning. Typically children might have had 6 or 7 schools before they turn 8, and that obviously comes with a whole heap of challenges educationally, but also socially, in terms of making friends and connecting with their peers.
Maybe if you go through the bapa kubos and see which ones you recognise from your area. So you have a look and see if there are any that you remember from home.
We would turn over between 30 and 40% of our roll every couple of years. So you're talking 50, 60 kids every 2 years. Yeah. It's significant. I mean, it's 2 full classrooms, which obviously has implications for 2 teachers and everything else that's wrapped up in that. We have a teacher aide and a teacher that take responsibility for those children alongside their classroom teacher. We actually use sort of family groups, but the biggest thing we've found with those kids is actually to make sure they continue to develop and to continue to use their first language. It's not trying to, squash the Filipino out of them to make them more New Zealander. It's actually celebrating their Filipino-ness that helps them learn English more efficiently and more effectively.
Bahai Kubo, Khalid, Munti.
We are seeing, I think, the dairy industry kind of mature a wee bit in Southland. I've been here for about 10 years now, and there seem to be bigger farms. There seem to be less share milking opportunities. And where schools have originally grown with sort of young families, there seem to be less young families moving around the place now. And as I said before, moving more frequently. So it's just a case of if everybody knows who's coming and who's going, it helps us understand the needs and the abilities and the interests of the children as they come, and obviously that helps us foster their learning.
Okay, Jim, we've been doing a bit of work on our fact sheets.
We're really thrilled that DairyNZ have come on board and been proactive with helping us to set up a database.
We started about 3 years ago a children's education program, and so the objective is to teach kids where milk comes from, because we're getting this sort of greater rural-urban divide. And so we've been taking our resources that we've developed into primary schools, both urban and rural, and that program is starting to get a bit of momentum now. But one thing we found when we started it was in particularly Southland and Canterbury, where they'd seen a lot of land use change with conversions to dairy. The dairy industry was causing these rural primary schools quite a bit of grief with the transient nature of the dairy farm worker, where they'd shift from one farm job to another, and so the kids were popping in and out of schools. When we were calling on these schools, they told us about this issue and said, they were a bit down on the dairy industry in general, and we weren't really aware of this issue because we hadn't engaged with them previously. And so what we did is we got together with the South and Rural Principals Association, and they wanted to talk to us as an industry. So we came down and they explained the nature of the problem. And so what we did was sort of work with them to go, okay, well, we can't stop people moving necessarily, but what can we do to actually make that process easier? And so collectively we came up with this idea of having a database where kids that you knew were going to move, the teachers could record details of their learning record. So when they came to a new school, they weren't starting with a clean sheet of paper. They already could hit the ground running with understanding a bit about that child's learning achievements to date. Our extension teams are working with farmers. They're actually now we're incorporating into our resources and our literature, etc. It's going, these are the sorts of considerations, and one of them is, you know, keeping your school up to play with what you're doing when you're moving. And so, you know, schools like Limehills don't get surprises where kids turn up unannounced.
We really are a genuine country school, so there's a lot of outdoors hands-on learning experiences. We're fortunate to have a wonderful farm which the children manage. They run about 20 ewes. We keep chickens, the vegetable gardens and the tunnel houses, and it just gives kids a really meaningful context to apply their learning. So it's great opportunities for science, it's great opportunities for children to actually collect some revenue through their farmers market that they run, and then they sit down together as a committee and decide how they want to reinvest their own funds back into their own school. So they really control their own projects right the way through. Recently we've started to add technology into that mix too. So, you know, we've always picked strawberries, made strawberry jam. There's great learning for children wrapped up in the kitchen around cooking, but now we put a QR code on the top of the jam jar and the children prepare the backstory about the product and they market that product and they make the website that the QR code links to. So it's really about trying to get the best of both worlds really and creating a really meaningful context for the children to enjoy their learning.
Guys, bring them along here and here as well, so that they can pollinate each other when they're growing.
The Global Cafe serves lots of different purposes, really. One of the major ones, one of the reasons it started, was to really just help some of our non-English speaking parents understand some of the things that we take for granted. So we have a wonderful pet show at Limehills School. It really is like an A&P show to some extent, but you know, a lot of those mums and dads had no idea what to expect. So it was an opportunity for the children to explain those sorts of things, whether it's sports day or triathlon or trips to the theatre. It's really about just making sure we do our best to make sure those parents understand things around our school. And it's really grown from there. It then became an opportunity for parents from other parts of the world to share their experiences and their culture and help us learn about them so that we knew those kids well as learners. And again, use those opportunities for those children to be celebrated within our school, you know, recognise their culture and their identity and for us to learn from them as much as they learn from us.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.